This is Down the Aisle Wrestling Podcast, where we only make one promise. We will always reach for that.
That's really.
With Robbie Mack and Kevin Laramie. Here's Kevin Laramie. And welcome to a brand new edition of Down the Aisle Wrestling Podcast. Robbie Mack, this week we had another Hall of Famer on the show.
We sure did, Kevin. We were supposed to talk to Ken a couple weeks ago, but just some communication got crossed up, but he was good enough to talk to us today.
And did he? Almost another half an hour of pure gold with a UFC Hall of Famer, bare knuckles fighter, mixed martial art legend, but most importantly, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. First of all, Rob, what did you think about the interview?
I thought it was awesome. I can honestly say, you and I have done a few interviews now, and I don't want to say I was nervous, but I'm like at one point when he was talking, I'm like, holy fuck, this is Ken Shamrock on the line with us. So it was it was really cool, and it was really exciting to hear from him. And he was a nice guy.
Absolutely. Which, when you're thinking about the world's most dangerous man, being a nice guy is not the first thing that comes to mind, but Ken Shamrock is.
Kevin, let's think about it like this. You and I are now friends with Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock. Who's going to fuck with us?
Exactly. Who is going to fuck with us? Probably not James Quinn.
I would hope it. I can't wait to see that fight. I'm not lying. And I told Ken off air, I'm like, dude, I feel sorry for the guy you're getting in there with.
But I'm glad, though, that he took the chance to introduce the bare knuckle like he did, because between you and me, when we started doing the research about the bare knuckle, we were not convinced.
It looked like Fight Club, eh?
It looked like even worse than Fight Club.
Yeah.
But now, with the explanation that he's bringing to the table, it makes a little bit more sense to me, and I'm looking forward to it now.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about it too. So he does a good job of selling it.
Yeah, he's a good seller. Maybe not in the ring.
The Gene Simmons of the MMA world.
Exactly. All right, without further ado, the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Or the Godfather of MMA, if you like.
Get out of my way!
It's with great pleasure that we welcome UFC Hall of Famer, mixed martial art legend, pro wrestling legend, Ken Shamrock to the show. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. First of all, I want to start to talk with you about your upcoming hands-free, no-glove, fist-to-fist fight. How did that fight came up, Ken?
Well, I've always been 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the MMA world and the fighting world, waiting for different types of opportunities that might come my way that would be interesting for me to get back in the ring and fight. Obviously, I'm not looking just to get in the ring and fight. I want things that are interesting, that are fun, and that would be fun for me and fun for the fans. And, of course, they make sense. So, basically, I've been going more toward the direction of business, trying to build different types of businesses. And things were going very well for me. As a matter of fact, Shamrock Slam, we're getting ready to launch that in a week with some crowdfunding and getting people involved. That's an exciting venture going on. We've got a Shamrock Executive Protection Agency, which is probably 3/4 of the way done. I did some protection work, some different types of work to try to get an idea and a feel of whether or not it's something I wanted to own my own business in. I did that. It was good. I thought we could really do something with it, with my ideas and my creativity, so we're moving forward on that. And, different opportunities that we've got a website up now. It's called 33. We'll probably change that name, but as of now, it's 33. It's an amateur fighting source for coaches, for gyms, for fighters, and it's a site for people to go to as amateurs. We're getting ready to launch that. Of course, we got Pro Rage, which is our professional fighter management corporate company, where we bring in professional athletes and we manage them in their career. And that right there, I can tell you on those things. I'm also probably about 8 hours away from signing a deal with the largest amateur fighting organization in the world and becoming partners, locking arms with them, moving forward to help develop some of the newest and some of the most exciting amateur fighters in the world and develop them into pros. And so that probably about 8 hours away from making that real. So when you talked about me getting involved with this bare knuckle, the reason why I brought up these other opportunities that we've been working on is I want people to realize that these things were real. These things are actually moving forward as I'm even making plans to move forward for bare knuckle fighting, along with some other interesting fights that come my way, other good opportunities, I believe, for myself and the fans. So all these things are still moving forward. All these businesses are still moving forward, but I was approached during all of these things that I was working on. My mind wasn't focused on fighting. I hadn't been thinking really much about it, but I always knew that I wanted at least to fight 2 or 3 more times with fights that made sense. A fight came to me. They brought this guy named Deka Hagi, who had been doing some bare-knuckle fighting. The guy has some pretty decent potential. He's a young kid. Looks like he has all the intensity in the world. Looks like he could probably go places. But as I was watching it and looking at it, I couldn't really feel the marketing ability. How do I market this fight? How do I make this fight exciting for people and myself when there's really nothing there that I see for myself to do other than just being another fight? And so I turned it down, not to do with anything about Deka Hagi. I think he's probably a great opponent, but it just didn't make sense marketing-wise, and I didn't know how I would market it for me to step back into the ring to fight again, especially at my age. So we turned and we walked away from it and said, thanks, but no thanks. I just don't see an opportunity here to really market this fight. And so they came back to us about 3 weeks later, and they gave us a name, James Quinn. And they told us a bit about him, and I said, okay, well, let me look into it. And as I started looking into it, I started to see it. Like, okay, this has got some legs. I can market this. This guy is undefeated, bare-knuckle fighting, great attitude, got a really tremendous history in this. And so I said, okay, well, the fighter seems real. Seems like we could market this. Now I want to do a little bit more in-depth research on, whether or not there's enough people out there that would be interested in something like this, or do we have to build it from the ground up? And so I started doing some research, going through some social media sites, looking for different types of bare-knuckle fighting. I saw all kinds of different things. One where they wore this glove with the knuckles cut out, and the knuckles would never touch you. But yeah, because the knuckles were exposed and they had an inch and a half of glove above the knuckle, they could call it bare knuckle, which was stupid. So I said, well, that's obviously not what we're looking at. So I looked a little bit more, and then I saw this documentary on James Quinn, and then I saw some of these fights that were happening in these between these bales of hay and on dirt gravel roads, and it was quite interesting too, because the more I watched it, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, this is not very good. But the more I watched it, I saw how many people turned to the site to at least watch this thing. They turned away. They didn't stay long. It was probably 30 seconds to a minute was the average person that would stay and watch. And the reason being is because it was the caliber of fighters that were fighting in these fights. Most of them didn't last a minute or 30 seconds, and if they did, it got sloppy after a minute. But the excitement is there. The people want it, and I started thinking to myself, this is a lot like No Holds Barred. When I first started doing it, people would come to watch it, but they realized the attention span didn't go very far because most of the time the fights were finished in 30 seconds or a minute, and if they didn't finish that long, the guys got so tired that they were tripping and falling over each other. But people wanted to see it anyways, and I see the same kind of excitement for this bare-knuckle fighting that I've seen with No Holds Barred. The opportunity's there. People want to see it. All we got to do is get in the caliber fighters that will turn it to a professional level. And so I thought me and James Quinn would be great guys to go in and actually do that, considering with his tremendous amount of experience in bare knuckle, his history in bare knuckle, and then, of course, my experience in bare knuckle and my experience in No Holds Barred. and my following and his following. And I thought, you know what, this is a good thing. And so I jumped on board. We did the contract, make sure everybody was happy, and that was that. And so the more that I'm going into this fight, the more I'm training, the more interviews I'm doing, I'm seeing everybody else seeing what I'm seeing. They see this thing as being something big.
All right, and what is the date of that fight? I know it's in April, but what's the precise date, Ken?
What's that?
What's the precise date of the fight? I know it's in April, but what's the date?
They don't. They've got a couple venues right now vying for the fight. I would probably say more like August. I know we were talking about June, but you need 6 months to the pay-per-view companies. Mm-hmm. They need at least 4 to 6 months to market a fight properly. And so if you're looking at June, we're running out of that time frame. So August looks to be, to me, the best place to have this fight.
All right. If we go back to your legendary mixed martial art and no-holds-barred career, you had many different rivalries. And here's a question that I asked Dan Severn a couple of weeks, which was one of your rivalries. What is the one mindset that you need to get into the octagon for a tournament, going to UFC 3? Watching you was a momentous moment in my life. I fell in love with mixed martial art watching you and Dan Severn back in the early 90s. But what was the mindset when you first walked into the octagon for the first time?
Well, I think you got to be very focused on the guy in front of you. I think you can't thinking about you. A lot of guys will go in and they'd start thinking about, well, I got another fight, so I've got to think about it. You know what? You don't think about it. You focus on the guy in front of you. You focus with the fight that you got. You finish that fight, and then immediately when you're done with that fight, you've got to focus on the next one. And you got to focus on what you're going to do, because you don't get a plan for an opponent because you don't know who's going to win the next fight. So you just don't know. So that kind of preparation is out the window. What you got to do is mentally focus on yourself and what you need to do to win the fight. And you have to do it within a 15 to 20-minute time span. Because when you win your first fight, you know you got to go in and fight this guy. You beat this guy. The next guy, you don't know who it's going to be. It's going to be one of the two guys. So you don't plan for that. You just basically focus on the fight, beat the guy you're fighting. Once you're done with that fight, then you focus on whoever wins that next fight, and you only have 15 or 20 minutes to do that, to be able to focus on your next opponent. So I think me personally in that is more about focusing on what's at hand and what's in front of you, and not worrying about what's around you or what's coming up.
Ken, you were a part of arguably one of the best WrestleMania matches in history at WrestleMania 13 with Stone Cold and Bret Hart as the referee. Now, I know you trained earlier in the 90s as a pro wrestler, and I think in the late 80s as well, but can you tell our listeners how you actually got involved in the WWF? Did Vince McMahon approach you, and what was it like to work in that WrestleMania 13 match?
Well, I tell you, the reason why I got involved in wrestling was because at that time, MMA was really taking a huge hit on pay-per-view. They were getting blocked. They weren't able to have the events in certain states. A couple times they had to set up. It was actually I believe it was in Carolina. I could be wrong, but we were in one of the other states, and they actually, after they had already set it up, they're getting ready to prepare to do the fight. The court had handed an injunction down and banned the event from happening. So they had to load everything up on a plane, a big 747 plane, 2 of them. You had to load all the ring and all the cameras, everything that happened for the production. They loaded on one plane, and then everybody else went on another plane. And we flew into Dothan, Alabama, and set that ring up in the morning of the fight, and then ended up having that fight that night and giving the tickets away for free to the people in Dothan, in order to keep this fight on, so that there was something they could show on TV, because they had already paid for that pay-per-view time. So these were things, was what was happening in the MMA world. And it got to a point to where Bob Meyerowitz had spent so much money fighting every town he went to, we had to go to court to be able to get the fight to happen. And basically what it did is it really wore him down, and financially, and he had to just at one point he just said, "Hey, listen, I can't afford to pay you what we agreed upon." And I understood where he was at. I wasn't mad. I understood where he was at. I knew the battles that they had been going through from state to state, everywhere they were having a fight. And I had to make a decision at that time whether or not I could continue to keep doing MMA, or I had to make another move. And the position I was in at the time was that I couldn't pay my bills if I didn't get the contract that I was promised. And so I had a conversation with Bob Meyerowitz. It was a pleasant conversation. I told him my position. He understood. And we both went our separate ways, him selling the company and me moving on into pro wrestling. And that's how it all started, was because there was a lot of issues happening with UFC at that time, and Bob Meyerowitz trying to fight in court in every state he went, trying to keep it alive. And so I got involved with pro wrestling because I needed to make another move in order to support my family, and Vince McMahon welcomed me with his arms wide open. He had an idea and a creation that he was thinking about bringing me in to help change pro wrestling, and I thought it was a great move. But one thing I think I really want people to know before I get into WrestleMania 13 is that people don't understand the reasons why they're watching MMA today. And the reason why they were able to watch MMA today was because of the hard work, including myself, because I was in a lot of these different court things, and I testified and even went on TV with Senator McCain, and I took a strong stance for MMA. But Bob Meyerowitz and even different people within the organization put a lot of time. Even John McCarthy, the referee, put a lot of time into fighting in every state that we went to. They would be in court fighting for our right to have this event put on. And if it wasn't for that, and Bob Meyerowitz spending that money to do that, MMA would be gone. So the guys like Dana White and Fertitas and all the fighters fighting in the UFC now are reaping the benefits and the rewards of the hard work and the stressful situations in which Bob Meyerowitz and a lot of these other guys, John McCarthy and a lot of these other guys behind the scenes that were fighting in court to keep it alive. That is so underrated that people don't even talk about that. But that's really the reason why MMA is still around, was because of those guys' efforts in fighting from state to state to keep MMA alive. And Dana White and Fertitas should be thanking this guy for all the work and the hard stuff that he put in to keep it alive, and these guys are now reaping the benefits because he fought those times to keep it alive. Mm-hmm. Now let's move into WrestleMania. Vince had an idea bringing me in. He saw how popular that MMA was. He saw how everybody was really going, wow, did you see a bare knuckle fight? And it seemed to be this trend going on that people really wanted to see these fights. And so I think Vince has always had his finger on the pulse on what's going on in the world by him bringing in different celebrities to do these celebrity matches at different times for WrestleMania, bringing in guys like Mike Tyson and what's his name, the linebacker Lawrence Taylor, and so many other people that have been brought in to kind of give that extra fan support with these guys that are really trending out there in the world. Vince is really good at that, and he saw an opportunity with a guy like myself who really was the face of No Holds Barred. And he saw an opportunity to bring me in, me becoming a free agent, and be able to bring me in as who I was, the world's most dangerous man, bare knuckle, no holds barred. And he knew that they were having issues because they lost all their superstars to WCW. And he had to find something that was going to keep him alive, keep him to survive. And genius. It was a genius move. He brought me in, and he felt like, you know what? Let's push the envelope a little bit. Let's turn somebody that's going to be saying the word ass on TV and being able to beat up his boss and rebel against authority. And so here he was trying to create this edgy product. And he thought, well, the biggest thing out there that's edgy right now is No Holds Barred. He brought me in. He took a guy like Bret Hart, who was living on the edge. He took a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was also a guy that lives on the edge, and a guy myself who is arguably the world's most dangerous man in the world. and he puts him into a match, and it's an I quit match. It's a match where somebody has to say uncle or I give up. And the two guys were tremendously talented in being able to put that kind of a match on. And then throwing me in the mix was like the icing on the cake, which made it real, which made everything roll perfect.
Yeah.
And so once that happened, you saw pro wrestling change. You saw pro wrestling go, oh my gosh, did you just see what happened? I mean, it was like watching an MMA match where people were like, did that really just happen? Did that just happen? And that's what they were saying with this. Did that just happen? These guys just go in there and fight each other? And so it was tremendous. And then you saw Stone Cold and Bret Hart, both those guys, just go to another level. You had the Canadian Stampede where we had the 8-man tag. It was just tremendous. It was like from that point, we rose to levels that had never been seen before. And it was because of that match.
Ken, you're also a part of one of my favorite, I'm going to say my favorite stable in wrestling history. And I have a bit of a confession for you, and I don't mean to bring up my inner nerd, but we had our own version of the Corporation in high school. Now, mind you, the guy who played you was not nearly your size, but, you know, he was the biggest guy that we had. So we're like, okay, you're Ken Shamrock. But can you tell us a little bit what it was like to be a part of the Corporation and just basically being part of the Attitude Era in general, and just what you guys exactly did to not only, I don't want to say put WCW out of business, but really just turn it around to make the WWF doing ridiculous ratings?
Well, you know, I guess it goes from like this, being a pro wrestler where you know, you were a pro wrestler and you walked around and people asked what you did, you say, hey, I'm a pro wrestler. But when we started changing to the Attitude Era, it was almost like then when people asked what we did, we said, yeah, man, we're pro wrestlers. There was a certain pride that arose throughout the world, whether it was in football or wrestling or anywhere. You became proud to be a part of pro wrestling. Mm-hmm. That Attitude Era, it really brought in that ruggedness, that toughness, that made people proud to say, hey, I watch wrestling, or hey, I am a wrestler, or hey, I'm going to the wrestling matches tonight. It was a huge change from before that, where you had half the world saying, yeah, that stuff's a joke, a bunch of comic characters, to where people were actually going, even on regular mainstream TV, they were actually showing different things that went on in pro wrestling. It became something special, and people were proud to be a part of pro wrestling.
Ken, I was also growing up, to this day, I was a big fan of Owen Hart, and I kind of asked Dan Severn this, because you guys, the three of you really had, and Steve Blackman, I guess, the four of you guys really had a similar style. What was it like to work with Owen Hart, and do you have any memories, and were you ever a victim of any Owen's famous pranks?
Well, I'll tell you, Owen was a tremendous person to work with. He had a really great mind for angles, and really a good hand at working. Could do anything you asked him to. Just a great person to be around. I remember we did the dungeon match and also the Lions Den match, and those were two very, very difficult places to work matches, because you didn't have the ropes, the turnbuckles, or the apron to fall out on, and it was straight work. When we did those matches, and Owen was the perfect guy for me to do it with, because he had a tremendous work ethic. I myself had a tremendous work ethic, and we were able to constantly keep action flowing in those matches. And I would love to see a lot of people be able to do the match that me and Owen did, whether it was in the Lions Den match or whether it was in the dungeon, and see whether or not anybody could duplicate what we did.
Absolutely. Ken, a last question before I let you go. I am really interested in the art of catch as catch can, and it's a dying art, unfortunately, nowadays with everything else existing. What did catch and catch can bring you when you were learning it in late 80s, early 90s, and how did it prepare you for everything else that you did in your life?
Well, it for one, it gave you confidence whenever you went into the ring. You knew who you were, and you knew in any situation that you were going to be okay. And that's not the same. That's not what most people are today in pro wrestling. Is a lot of these guys, they're coming in and it's strictly show. But, you know, you talk about the old school wrestlers, and even in the Attitude Era, it just seemed like everybody there could handle themselves in the ring if they had to. And it was different. It was just different. And so that Catch as Catch Wrestling was really something that really gave you a tremendous amount of confidence and the ability to be able to actually put on some good matches because you were able to work. You were able to get down and dirty and get sweaty and move around and hustle and flow. And so I think it really transpired into people not knowing whether that was real or not real. And I think that's what's missing today.
Thanks, Ken, for your time, and looking forward to see your fight. And until next time, take that bump.
Hey, this is Ken Shamrock, world's most dangerous man, and they call me the Godfather. You're listening to Down the Aisles.